And now, live from Smoke on the Water in Greenville's West End, here is Straight Up with Sturge with Mark Sturgis.
Welcome back in. 7:26 on this Friday night edition of Straight Up with Sturge, our last show of the week here on WCCP Talk Sports 104.9, the flagship station of Clemson Athletics. And to the guest line we go. We bring on Kevin McGuire, managing editor of crystalballrun.com, college football writer for CBS Sports.com, host of the No2MinuteWarning.com podcast. And, oh, yeah, you can follow him on Twitter at Kevin on College Football or Kevin on CFB. Kevin, happy holidays, and thank you for joining us on this Friday night.
Happy holidays back to you, and thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's get started locally since we're the flagship station of Clemson Athletics. This Orange Bowl matchup with Ohio State has big implications for Clemson football moving forward, as we saw as evidenced by last year's win against LSU in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. But there's so many variables in bowl games. You know, who really wants to be there? What's your thought process on Friday night's Orange Bowl matchup between the Tigers and the Buckeyes?
Well, first of all, of all the BCS games outside of the championship game, this is the one I'm most looking forward to because I think we're looking at Clemson and Ohio State. I think they're pretty evenly matched. I think they have a lot of the same characteristics that they can exploit on their offense, and we'll see what they can do on the defense. But I'm really looking forward to this one because I'm really curious to see how Ohio State approaches this game after coming so close to playing in a BCS championship game, perhaps. And how do they shrug off that Big Ten championship game loss? How motivated are they going to be? I think they will be just fine. I think Urban Meyer's going to have his Buckeyes ready to go. And then, of course, Clemson. Obviously, Florida State's with the ACC this year. Clemson was the second best team in this conference, though. So I have no doubts about what they're capable of doing. And with Taj Boyd and Sammy Watkins, I want to see how these guys go out. I think it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you know what? You're seeing the media kind of split because, I think Ohio State, people realize they've won 24 of their last 25 games under Urban Meyer, but they were also just 25 minutes from potentially playing for a national title. And we've seen in years past that team that doesn't reach that goal that was sitting right in front of them tends sometimes not to show up in a bowl game.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously what's going to be the biggest question about Ohio State going forward. After winning all of those games, undefeated last year in Urban Meyer's first year, being locked out of the postseason due to probation, and then coming so close this season, what is the mentality of this team going forward? And I think it's going to be okay. Again, I think Urban Meyer has been through this kind of thing before, where he's been close to a BCS championship game. He's been in big games before, of course. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. I think Ohio State is looking to end this season on a high note. And even though they're not playing in the Rose Bowl, playing in the Orange Bowl in Miami is certainly nothing to bat an eye at. And I think that's going to be something that's going to motivate them. I think they'll be okay as far as the motivation is concerned. And I'm looking at some guys there on that team that, they really want to show what they're capable of doing. And I don't think that they got a chance to do that against Michigan State. Michigan State just had a defense that was able to lock them down the way that few teams have been able to do over the last 2 years, really. So what Ohio State does in preparing for this game, I think that they're going to have some problems in trying to figure out exactly what went wrong and what they can do to fix that. But given all the time that they will have to prepare, we'll see what they come up with. And I think it's pretty interesting because I think that Braxton Miller is still a difference maker as far as that Ohio State offense is concerned. So Clemson's going to have their hands full, and it should be a real back-and-forth matchup, I think.
We're talking with Kevin McGuire, managing editor of crystalballrun.com, college football writer for CBS Sports.com, host of the No2MinuteWarning.com podcast. And Kevin, as we move to South Carolina and their matchup with the Badgers in the Capital One Bowl Wednesday, Carolina's sitting ranked number 9 and Wisconsin's sitting number 19. I think these two teams are a little bit closer. I'm having a hard time grasping Wisconsin's final game against Penn State and that loss. But how do you think these teams match up? Because Clemson proved that you can run the ball on South Carolina, and that's one thing that Wisconsin does very well.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened with Wisconsin in that game against Penn State. I followed Penn State for a long time, and I definitely did not see that coming. Wisconsin just seemed like they laid an egg in their finale there. But I'm feeling pretty good about what they have going forward. I don't think there's going to be much of a reason to worry about them bouncing back. They're certainly going to have what it takes. A solid defense, I think. Obviously they had their shortcomings against Penn State, and earlier in the year against Ohio State. But this is a Wisconsin team that is very difficult for teams to beat, and I think that we've seen that this season. You look at their year. The Arizona State game earlier in the year ended on a controversial, field goal timing issue with the refs. So maybe they would have won that game. It's probably a 10-win team we're talking about right now. Wisconsin, they like to run the football. I'm sure that's going to be their big key going into this game against South Carolina. And then what are they going to do to slow down Jadeveon Clowney? I think that's one of the things that a lot of teams have really focused on this season. What can they do to get away from Clowney? First of all, what is Clowney going to have on the field when he's there?
Right.
Because I know he's had his ups and downs this season. Maybe a little bit overblown at times, but certainly this is a South Carolina team that is very capable of making some things happen on defense.
Yeah, quite frankly, I think Wisconsin needs to hire a couple of South Carolina highway patrolmen, because that's about the only people that have slowed down Jadeveon Clowney. And granted, that's come twice in the last 3 weeks. But, I also think Connor Shaw has I think he's already cemented his legacy at South Carolina as their greatest quarterback ever. But if he's able to go out with another New Year's Day win, then he puts himself so far up on the pedestal for South Carolina football. So both of these teams have a lot to play for on Wednesday. Finally, what about Auburn FSU? Because I've seen Florida State up close and personal twice this year, against Clemson and then a few weeks ago in the ACC championship game. And then I view Auburn as, while they won the ACC, maybe the luckiest football team I've seen in a long, long time. Can Florida State end this run of 7 consecutive national titles by the Southeastern Conference?
I think they can, and I think what comes into play here is Florida State has a lot of time to prepare for this Auburn team that really got hot at the right time of the season. I mean, I know Auburn, they put together a very strong year from start to finish, but they really got hot towards the end of the season there. Georgia, the miracle there of what happened against Alabama, and then against Missouri, they were just feeding off of the emotions, I think, of the last few weeks. So I'm kind of curious to see what Auburn does. Can they keep that momentum going after such a long layoff? I know that it really hasn't been a concern for some of these SEC teams in the BCS championship game in years prior, but I think this Auburn team might be a little bit different. I know they won a championship a few years back, but this is not exactly the same team. I know Gus Malzahn has been through this before, but I'm really curious to see what they do here. I think Florida State probably has been the most dominant team from start to finish this season. And I think they've really met those expectations. Obviously, what Jameis Winston has been doing has been incredible, although the last couple of games that he's played, he's probably shown some of his freshman, habits there. So I think that that's something that they'll spend plenty of time preparing him for, and really the rest of the team. And I think Florida State's going to have a very good chance to bring an end to the streak.
Yeah, and let me ask you this. This is the way I've kind of gone back and forth about this game. I think if this BCS title game was played 2 weeks after the SEC championship game, then Auburn could have maybe kept that role that they were on, because, they were just, the breaks went their way, but they kept themselves in the games to get those breaks. 5 weeks of a layoff, I think it is more detrimental to Auburn than it is to Florida State.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I think Auburn has been that hot team, and they've been riding on the momentum from week to week to week, but now that they have this layoff, how do they keep that going once they get back on the field for a game? Obviously, you can do whatever you want in practice, but once you get onto the game against a team that is very well equipped on both sides of the football, it's a much different thing. And now, not to say that Auburn hasn't been playing some good teams this year. Obviously, beating Alabama is very significant. Alabama probably could have beaten Florida State. I don't know, but this Florida State team is a monster, I think, on offense, and their defense is very aggressive and they're very athletic. So I think Auburn has a lot of work to do to prepare for this Seminoles team. And like I said, Florida State has been the most dominant team from start to finish this season. I don't think there's much question about that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you. We're talking with Kevin McGuire, managing editor of CrystalBallRun.com, college football writer for CBS Sports.com, and a host of other duties. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at KevinOnCFB. Now, Kevin, the reality of bowl season, it's 34 exhibition games and one that matters, the BCS title game. Outside of the 3 we've discussed, what are a couple of bowl games that you're going to keep your eye on for whatever various storylines that might come out of it?
Well, I think the most entertaining game outside of BCS games is probably going to be that Cotton Bowl between Oklahoma State and Missouri. Obviously, a couple old Big 12 rivals getting back together, but obviously they're also the conference runner-ups in the SEC and the Big 12, so I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that one. Should be a very entertaining game. On the flip side of that, you go back into the BCS mix, the Rose Bowl between Stanford and Michigan State. If you like defense, that's the game to watch this season.
That's right.
And then, of course, sticking to the ACC, Duke, the ACC championship runner-up, I guess, taking on Johnny Manziel and Texas A&M in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. I think that could be very interesting to see what Manziel has in store for us, and what I think a lot of people are expecting will be his last game. And then, of course, the big storyline will be Texas and Oregon in the Alamo Bowl with Mac Brown's final game.
Yeah, and thank you for that softball that you just set me up with for the final question for you tonight. That's probably outside of the BCS title game, that Texas opening's probably the most dominant storyline in college football. What's your gut tell you how that thing may play out? Because I've been told anything that comes out between now and after the BCS title game may just be blowing smoke, trying to find out who's leaking information out to these websites that follow the University of Texas. But they're not going to do anything until after the BCS title game. How do you think this job ends up playing out?
You know what? I'm really trying to wrestle my head around this one, too, because I really have no idea which way they're going to go with it. I have a feeling that Texas is probably going to bring in a head coach that has been somewhat successful at the college level. I don't think the NFL coaches are going to be in this mix ultimately. I don't know if Texas is going to take a chance going with one of the hot assistant coaches out there, although it's a possibility. But I just have a feeling that they're going to want a guy who has been a head coach somewhere before, either built up a program or turned a program around, and bring him in to see what he can do to Texas. Who that is, I have no idea at this point. And I think now that they have their search committee together, more names or fewer names for whatever amount of time, and I'm not even sure I'm going to buy the fact that they're going to hold off until after the BCS championship game stuff is taken care of, because I just get a sense that if you're Texas, you need to get a guy in there now so you can really set the tone. When you get back into the recruiting area, once the dead period is lifted and everything, you can have that momentum going for you, and you can really build your program around one guy who's going to be the face of one of the top programs in the country. It's a big job to fill for whoever's willing to take that responsibility.
All right, Kevin, tell my listeners what you're working on, what you're going to be up to here during the bowl season, and how they can find your work, because you're one of the best.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Obviously, we'll be doing a lot of bowl coverage. You can check it out over at crystalballrun.com. Lots of stuff going up there. We're trying to preview all the games as they're going about, and we'll try to touch on some of the big storylines there as well. You can also follow me on Twitter at KevinOnCFB, and you can get the links to anything that I have posted and what some of the other guys at Crystal Ball Run have as well.
All right. Well, happy holidays and happy New Year to you. Be safe and just enjoy this gluttony of college football heading your way over the next 10 days.
Thank you, and I sure will. Same to you as well.
All right. Kevin McGuire, one of the best guys, literally. Go ahead, if you're around your computer, go to Twitter and follow him at Kevin on CFB. You'll be glad you did. He puts out a lot of good information, and sometimes when you hear me say I have a source that hit me up with something, it may be Kevin McGuire. You never know, but he's on top of it all. Do yourself a favor. All right, off the break we go. Phone lines are open. Whatever you want to talk to me about the rest of the night on this Friday night edition of Straight Up with Sturge, it's on you. We got a lot of other bowl information, maybe some NFL heading your way as well. We are WCCP Talk Sports 104.9 FM, the flagship station of Clemson Athletics.